Death, a daunting phenomenon we've been trying to make sense of since as long as we've known ourselves. Just think about it. For the past 13.8 billion years since the inception of the universe, we haven't existed for even a single second. Throughout that entire span, from the moment of the Big Bang, we have no recollection, consciousness, or awareness. Yet in the last 4 billion years alone, countless humans and animals lived before we were even born. They possessed consciousness, had perceptions of those times. Then suddenly, we too came into existence with a newfound consciousness. Our earliest memory could be the scent of our mother or playing games with our father. We began to learn about ourselves, our surroundings, and the universe. Yet after a few decades, we're returning to nothingness once again, just like before we were born. As before, we'll have no inkling of the time that passed, no awareness or consciousness. Those who passed away before us have no influence on us, no means of communicating with us, no memory or knowledge of what we've done. After we're gone, perhaps trillions or even quadrillions of generations of life will come and go, but we won't be here. We won't possess any memory, awareness, or knowledge of what's transpiring. The weight of this merciless truth is not easy to bear. It's not death, but life that seems like a cosmic jest. A being's consciousness flickering into existence for an infinitesimally short span compared to the entire lifespan of the universe, only to fade away again. This is precisely why our ancestors, unable to shoulder this burden, attempted to imbue this event with meaning. They crafted various mythological stories and narratives to convince themselves that death isn't the end. It's a highly understandable psychological defense mechanism, because replacing the pain of losing a loved one is exceedingly difficult. Thus, especially in times of suffering or longing, the idea that those individuals continue to exist beyond death and that we'll reunite with them one day might not be the most imaginative notion, yet it's a reasonable narrative for our ancestors, a comprehensible solace. Is there anything after death? We don't know. However, from a scientific standpoint, there's currently no valid or sufficient reason to assume such a thing exists. But that's not the focus of this video. In this video, I'll attempt to explain why the concept of death exists when viewed from a physical, biological, and evolutionary perspective. If you're ready, let's get started. The key to comprehending death lies in understanding the fundamental basis of existence. Since we are biological entities, we tend to perceive everything through a biological lens. Thus, when explaining death, our minds naturally gravitate towards biology, yet biology is built upon two more foundational sciences, physics and chemistry. What happens in these two fields forms the basis for everything in biology. The impact of a physical law on biology might not be immediately apparent. However, a discerning and educated eye can easily recognize this relationship and interaction. Consequently, without insights from these domains, understanding death remains elusive. When we approach death from a physical perspective, two truths emerge. The first one relates to the fact that in closed systems, entropy, the measure of disorder, must always increase. This is defined by the second law of thermodynamics. In open systems, however, it's possible to counter the increase of entropy by importing energy from the outside. The relationship between entropy and energy needs to be well understood. This principle holds true for systems without the influx of energy or mass. Yet living beings are not like these systems. They acquire energy and mass from the outside. Think about it. When you eat, what are you doing? You're breaking down a well-organized food source, essentially increasing its disorder. In doing so, you release the energy stored in the chemical bonds within the food, which your cells use. Using this energy, you manage repairs, growth, and various tasks in your cells, tissues, and organs. Somewhere within this process, disorder is reintroduced into the food. However, with the energy you've gained, you can sustain your order. Death seems to be connected to this. After death, the energy flow ceases. We can't nourish ourselves, and our cells begin to disintegrate. We become a closed system. Consequently, we succumb to entropy, becoming more disordered. If we were to define death in a physical sense, it might be described as eventually succumbing after resisting the second law of thermodynamics for a certain period. But why can't we stay immortal by continually maintaining energy intake? Why can't we consistently resist the increase in entropy? Another physical truth comes into play here. Forces. Every entity is constantly subjected to various forces. These could be simple forces like impact and reaction from other objects, or more subtle, initially invisible forces like internal forces experienced during the functioning of our organs. Imagine a rock. Since its existence, it's constantly eroded, right? Countless forces like wind, waves, earthquakes slowly wear it down. But the rock lacks a mechanism for self-repair because it isn't composed of organic matter like what we call rock. If the sand grains within it could divide and multiply, if it could perform tasks while harnessing external energy, rocks could repair themselves. But unlike rocks, we have a mechanism to address erosion: cell division. This mechanism allows us to replace worn out or damaged cells. So why can't we endlessly regenerate by continually dividing? Some organisms actually do this. Certain creatures like lizards are exceptional at organ regeneration. However, even they can't do this indefinitely. That's because, unlike bacteria, our repair cells stem from a very specific cell. Stem cells. Stem cells are the fundamental cells that can differentiate into other types of cells. As these cells are used and depleted, the repair processes become more challenging, and we essentially transform into rocks. As we erode, we grow weaker. This opens the door for bacteria, fungi, and other pathogens that are ready to consume us. They invade, make us sick, and ultimately kill us. When we say someone died of natural causes or of old age, we're actually referring to the failure of one or several organs due to the invasion of pathogens like bacteria or fungi caused by an aging and deteriorating system, followed by the collapse of the entire system. This organ could be the heart, liver, kidneys, and so on, but spontaneous death isn't a thing. There's always an organ failure and an organism or process behind that organ's failure. Collapse of the entire system. This organ could be the heart, liver, kidneys, and so on, but spontaneous death isn't a thing. There's always an organ failure and an organism or process behind that organ's failure. So why haven't mechanisms to prevent this arisen in the evolutionary process? Why aren't our cells immortal? Because evolution doesn't work that way. Consider this. What exactly are your expectations from evolution? Do you expect, for instance, a 70-year-old individual to be saved from dying due to simple physical reasons by evolution? However, the only thing that evolution continues is surviving until the reproductive age and then being able to reproduce. After that point, there's nothing more the evolutionary process can do. You've already reproduced and passed on your genes to future generations. This includes the genes that determine what will happen to you in later life. Remember, evolution isn't consciousness, intelligence, or brilliance. It's a law of nature, much like gravity. Expecting evolution to continue shaping us after the reproductive age is like wondering why gravity occasionally doesn't let us fly. The only thing that evolution can do is ensure survival up to the point of reproducing. Beyond that, there's no meaningful purpose for a given individual's continued existence in the wild. What matters is the general population of the species and its continuity. This continuity must be shaped based on advantages and disadvantages that adapt to changing environmental conditions. Otherwise, individuals with disadvantageous genes under environmental conditions would continue consuming limited resources. This would threaten the survival of the species. This brings us to another point. There's a resource problem in nature. Yes, the Earth has an amazing natural resource and almost limitless products. However, when we look at local regions, scarcity, drought, and deficiency are frequently encountered situations. For example, when we feed bacteria in optimal laboratory conditions, they reproduce about every 20 minutes. But when we place them in their natural habitats, the time can extend to hours or even days because they can't find food in nature. Resources are limited, at least until they reach you. Therefore, it's advantageous for many species to maintain a population below a certain threshold. Otherwise, the limited resources would be rapidly consumed, leading to the extinction of the species. This is why hardly any species can be immortal. The conditions that would make this advantageous are extremely rare. Moreover, the number of species with such successful cell renewal variations within populations is almost negligible. Thus, there's a lack of variations that selection could work upon. From all these perspectives, we see that death is one of the most crucial mechanisms of nature. Death exists so that resources can be allocated to the succeeding generations. Consider this: if bacteria never died and kept reproducing with infinite resources, their growth would be exponential, progressively accelerating. A single bacterium would produce 2 bacteria every few minutes. These 2 bacteria would turn into 4, then 8, then 16. Within just 36 hours, Earth's surface would be covered by a layer of bacteria about 30 centimeters thick. I'm not talking about bacteria hanging around in the air. I mean dense enough for you to step on. I'm talking about visible heaps of bacteria covering the planet's surface. After merely 4 hours, only 40 hours from the start, we would be buried in bacteria up to our heads. If bacteria could survive in space, the entire observable universe would be covered by bacteria in a short while. In some parallel universes, perhaps, due to specific conditions, immortal bacteria evolved and those universes couldn't progress further because they were covered in bacteria. Who knows? This is why death is so crucial in nature. Moreover, keep in mind that when one organism dies, it becomes a source of sustenance for many others. Death is ruthless. However, for the awe-inspiring nature we admire, it holds significant importance. We can also see this when we look at the genetic history of evolution. For instance, if our cells didn't die and kept dividing uncontrollably, well, that actually has a name, what we call cancer. That's precisely it. Cancer is essentially a declaration of immortality and independence from the rest of the body by a group of cells. Normally, a gene called TP53 on the 17th chromosome produces a protein that halts cells from dividing uncontrollably. However, due to imperfections in the universe and our bodies, this gene occasionally makes mistakes and cells divide uncontrollably, leading to tumors or cancer. Almost all animals in the evolutionary process have evolved this tumor-suppressing gene, showing how crucial controlled division and lifespan limits are in the evolutionary timeline. We inherited this gene from our very first multicellular ancestors. In some organisms, various genetic mechanisms, like mutations leading to the formation of additional copies, make this gene work even better. An example of this can be seen in a species known as the naked mole rat. It is believed that these animals are either entirely resistant to cancer or highly resistant. However, we don't possess these enzymes that protect telomeres during cell division. We can also find evidence of death in the structural characteristics of our chromosomes. Each chromosome has regions called telomeres at its ends. These regions are so critical that they've conclusively proven the fact that humans are closely related to chimpanzees and other monkeys, but telomeres don't serve just one purpose. They also shorten a bit with each cell division, turning our cells into ticking time bombs. When telomeres reach a certain length, chromosomes can no longer be copied properly and the cell dies. The bomb has exploded. For this event to occur throughout the cells, enough time has passed for the individual to die. This is how death has been deeply ingrained in our genes through the evolutionary process. Some enzymes have evolved in certain organisms to protect their telomeres during division. However, we don't possess these enzymes. Researchers are delving into these areas to uncover the secrets of death and immortality. We can also trace another sign of death in accumulated mutations. The number of spontaneous mutations an individual accumulates in their genes over 3 years is much, much lower compared to those accumulated over 30 years, right? This is because mutations increase with cell divisions and are present in new cells. Longer-lived individuals will inevitably accumulate more mutations. While mutations are an important source of diversity from an evolutionary standpoint, they can disrupt an organism's function if they cannot be corrected or are directly damaging. Therefore, the statistical likelihood of an erroneous mutation leading to illness and death is higher in individuals who live longer. So death is also ingrained in the structure of our genes through the possibility of harmful mutations. Of course, there are many more details I could share on this topic. For example, the theory of antagonistic pleiotropy suggests that genes advantageous in youth may have opposing effects in later life, contributing to aging and death. While some genes supporting this have been identified, we've also found genes that refute it. I'll discuss more of these in the future. Moreover, there are animal experiments where aging and death have been halted or even reversed. So every day we're getting closer to slowing aging and postponing death. But we don't have time to cover all of these in this video. However, we will touch on these topics in upcoming videos. I'll explain the details to you. But what I want you to do is to contemplate whether immortality, considering all I've just discussed, would be advantageous. At a time when we haven't even managed to reach another planet and when we're recklessly depleting the resources of our only home, do you think biological immortality is a wise leap for the human species in the long run? And what about digital immortality? Transferring our consciousness to a machine and living forever. We'll address all of these when the time comes. So after subscribing to SciFact and hitting that notification bell, please stay tuned. Goodbye.